In this video, we're going to be merging the RPG fishing asset with the dynamic combat system. So to get started, let's go ahead and open up the RPG fishing folder. And let's find the skeleton. It's in the mannequin folder, character, mesh, UE4 mannequin skeleton. And in the skeleton tree tab, scroll down to the right hand section and find the fishing pole socket. Right click and copy selected socket. Now we're going to open up our dynamic combat system skeleton. Click anywhere in the skeleton tree and paste sockets. And it should paste in the proper place, right here on the thumb 03. Now we're going to go back to the RPG fishing folder and go back to the skeleton. And now we're going to delete the skeleton. And in the far left corner here, on the replace references, let's select the skeleton combat mannequin and replace references. That'll allow us to use all of the fishing animations with our combat skeleton. Now let's go back to the RPG fishing folder, open blueprints, and open the BP underscore fishing spot. Okay, before we do anything here, we actually have to go to the dynamic combat system folder, blueprints, and open the BP combat character. In the components tab in the top left, we're going to add component and add our C underscore fishing component. And make sure you compile and save. And now let's go back to our BP fishing spot. And on the begin play event, where it has the cast to BP fishing player, we're going to just replace that with a cast to combat character. And the as BP combat character won't plug into the set player node, so we have to select it, and in the details panel, change the variable type to BP combat character. Change variable type. And now we should be able to connect it to our set player node. And now let's compile. And we'll get a list of errors here. It's just things that we have to replace now. So go ahead and just start by clicking on the first one. Hold Control and just drag it up here. The sea fishing component, we're going to have to get a new component for it. So just delete that. Drag off the player variable and get fishing. It's going to be down at the very bottom with the component image by it. And then let's plug that into the set catching fish. And we're going to copy this sea fishing node here, because we're going to be using that a couple times. That'll speed it up a little bit. And now let's go to the next one. This one we can just drag right up, compile, and we're just going to quickly go through all of these now. Okay, so now we should be good for our BP fishing spot graph. And now let's hop into the BP combat character. And in the far left side in the My Blueprint tab, we're going to search for the input buffer. And we're going to go to the input buffer consumed event. You can go ahead and ignore this is staggered and this branch here. These are from a separate tutorial for the stagger meter, which is on Patreon. So we're just going to add a branch in between here. So if you don't have this branch for the stagger meter or anything else, this branch would connect to the true on the is character alive. Now if you scroll down to the bottom of the components tab, you can get the fishing component. From that we want to get is fishing. And we'll plug that in as the condition for our branch. That way if the player is fishing, they won't be able to use their combat attacks, jump, roll, parry, and switching their weapons. But we will also have to add this check on a few other things. For example, the use tool event is not on here. It doesn't use the input buffer. So we'll go ahead and now go find the use tool. And we'll just add that same thing right in here, just to check if the player is fishing. And there may be, I'm going to make sure I connected that other one to false. I may not have. Okay, yeah, let's make, you got to make sure the branch is false. You want to make sure the player is not fishing. And there might be a few other events you'd have to put on here. I'm not going to take the extra time to go through and look for all of them, but if you find anything that can interrupt the fishing, all you need to do is add these 3 nodes here to check and make sure the player is not fishing. Okay, now let's move on to, let's go back to the RPG fishing folder, blueprints, and we're going to open the anim notifies, and we'll start with the AN line control. All we have to do here is change the cast node, so let's go ahead and just change that to our combat character. And we'll have to replace that fishing component. And we'll come back to this catch fish event because we're going to make some changes in there as well. But for now, let's go ahead and go back to the anim notifies folder. We're going to open up the AN show fishing pool. And we got to do the same thing here, just replace the cast node. And since we copied over our socket, we don't need to change the socket names here. If you're using a different socket, you'll want to make sure you change those 2 names there. Alright, now we're going to open up the fishing component. If we go back to our AN line control and just double click on this catch fish, it'll take you to there because that's what we're going to be starting with. But we'll go ahead and find it in the folders. Just go to blueprints and components and C_fishing. The fishing template has just a basic inventory setup, just kind of for demonstration. We're going to be changing this so that it uses the DCS inventory. But one thing we want to do first, so that we can actually access the player, is we're going to need to get our begin play event. And on begin play, we'll cast to combat character. Right click the as BP combat character, promote to variable, and we're just going to name it player. Okay, now we can come down to our catch fish event, and we're going to erase all of the inventory stuff. So we'll erase the fish inventory, break fish inventory, and the collapsed graph here to add fish to inventory. And we can also erase the fish inventory variable because we won't need it anymore. And now let's get our player variable. From the player variable, add to inventory. The event's going to be called add item inventory. And we'll just connect this one to trout. And now let's set the amount to 1, since you'll just be catching one fish at a time every time. And now we need to set the item class, but to do that we're going to need to go back and make an item class for it. So let's go to our dynamic combat system folder, blueprints, items, object items, instances, and we're just going to duplicate the health potion, since we're going to make it where you can eat the fish to regain health, kind of similar to how a health potion works. So right click and duplicate, and we'll just name this trout. I'm going to name it trout raw, because I'm going to be doing a part 2 video on this in the near future, where we'll take the raw trout and we'll have a little cooking area where we can cook the trout, and that way it will take the raw trout out of the inventory and add a cooked trout, which would give the player more health than eating a raw one. But for this video, we're just going to be having just the fish that we catch. We're not going to be adding the cooking yet. Let's go ahead and open up the trout raw. I'm going to change the value to 5. And I don't have another animation to use right now, so we'll use the montage drink potion. But we do need to go to it, and we're going to duplicate it. I'll name this one M underscore eat fish. And we're going to open it up, and we'll leave everything here besides the Q potion heal. You'd probably want to change that noise to an eating noise instead of the potion noise, but we're just going to take it out because it sounds really weird with the fish. And now let's go back to our trout raw, and we can change this to our montage eat fish. We're going to take the displayed item off. You could make a new displayed item, and instead of having the potion display, have a fish display. But I don't currently have a fish mesh, so we're going to skip that part. And we're just going to set that to none so the potion doesn't show. Let's change the name to trout, or I'll do raw trout. We'll change the description. And the type, for now we're going to leave it tool so that we can still eat it and use it. But when we do the cooking part, we're going to be coming back to the raw trout. Either we can keep it as a tool and make it so you can eat it for a small amount of health, or we can make it a material to where you can't eat it unless you actually cook it first. So we'll be going over that a bit more, and you guys will be able to decide how you want to do it, but we'll go through that in the cooking video. So if we were to change it to a material, we'd also want to uncheck is consumable so we couldn't eat it, but we're leaving it for now. And we're gonna get a new image now for this. I'm gonna just put it in the textures folder here. So I've got both a trout image and a cooked trout. I just slightly changed the color on the two. We're not going to be using both of them yet, but we will be soon. So we'll go ahead and put our trout icon. And now that's done. We have now created our item. We can go back to our fishing component and add our item class trout raw. Now let's go back to the trout raw. If you hit this browse button here, it's going to take us right to it in the content browser, or you can just find it. We're going to duplicate this, and now we'll have a rainbow trout raw. And I'll go ahead and quickly add the other textures I have for the trout, bass, and the shark. I'm going to make this one give you 10 health, I guess. We'll change the name to raw rainbow trout. And change our icon. And now we'll go back, duplicate this one. And this one's going to be the bass raw. And now we'll duplicate this one, and this will be the last one we're doing for now. This is going to be the shark raw. Okay, I'm going to close down all of these items because we're done with them now. And now let's duplicate this add item. And plug these all in. And let's set our item classes to be correct with which event they're plugged into. I'm going to go ahead and just collapse these into a graph just to make it look a little nicer. And the way this collapsed, we don't actually need all of those self pins there. We're going to go ahead and change some of these names. All the execute pins we're going to change to add trout, add rainbow trout, add bass, and add shark. And we're going to remove all these self pins besides the top one. And we'll just change the name to inventory components. And we'll move all of these up to that one. And let's open it up and double check. It seems to not have connected them, so we'll just reconnect them real quick. Okay, so now we've replaced our inventory with the DCS inventory. And I believe we are now ready to test it out. So I'm going to go ahead and make a quick little scene here. I'm going to add a landscape. And we'll erase this demo level here. Let's quickly build our lighting, because that looks horrible. So right over here, I'm going to go ahead and go to our landscape editor. That's not it. And if we hold shift and click, we can bring our landscape down. We'll just make a little pond here. Doesn't have to look perfect. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that part right now. And now we're just going to grab a cube. It didn't go in. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not going in there. Okay, we'll go grab a cube from our content browser because that's being weird. I'm going to bring this over to a flat part so we can get the leveling right. And we'll just make this very large, cover this whole pond area. I clicked something on my mouse and now it's being really weird. Okay. And we'll set the material to the ocean water material. That comes with the fishing pack. It's just from the starter content, so it's not the best material, but it's what we have to use right now. It looks pretty bad actually, but you guys will be able to find your own water materials, of course. And there's better ways of making a pond besides this as well. We're just doing this just for the demonstration because we don't have all the assets handy that we need to make a nice pond. I'm just trying to use only everything that's from Dynamic Combat System and the fishing template. So let's go ahead and go to our RPG Fishing blueprints, and we're going to bring in our BP fishing spot. And we'll just put it right here at the edge of the water. And make sure that you turn your arrow to face the water. You notice the sign says fish name. If you don't set a fish type here, it's just going to tell you that it's empty and that you can't fish there. It doesn't let you fish if it's set to empty, because in the fishing template there's going to be an option where you can actually set a number of fish. Once you fish for so long, that spot's going to be empty. You'll have to find a new spot. And you set your minimum wait time and maximum wait time. For the current animation, it looks best if you use 1 to 3 only. If you go up higher, then the animation ends. Or actually, I put a loop on there, but it doesn't look the best because the animation wasn't made properly to have a seamless loop. But I'll be getting someone to do some better animations pretty soon, and I'll update that. And then you'll be able to use any wait time and it'll look nice. So let's go ahead and set this fish type to trout. And we'll just duplicate this. And we'll set this one to rainbow trout and bass. And this one will be shark. And let's go ahead and test it out now. The lighting over here is really bad, so it's kind of hard to see that. And we shouldn't be able to move, jump, or use anything. Okay, so the lure hits the water, and the player would be able to walk on the water. Obviously, if you had a better water system set up, you wouldn't be able to do that. For now, we're just going to go ahead and take the collision off. Collision preset will be no collision. The instant swimmable water, I might do a separate video on merging it with that as well, because it's actually quite cool. The water looks nice, and you can easily make it so the little bobber on the end of the fishing pole kind of bobs in the water. And so that's a really nice effect. It looks really good. Then we pull up our inventory, we see we got our trout here now. I'm going to go ahead and set it as our active item so we could see as we get more of them. And if you hit E again, it'll stop interacting with the fishing spot. And now we can eat our fish. The montage doesn't really match it, but oh well. And so we'll catch a couple of each of them now real quick, just to make sure they're all working. if you're in the middle of catching a fish, pressing the E key won't do anything. You have to wait till you're done pulling the fish out. So now we've got our trout and our 2 rainbow trout. We'll catch a bass now, and then we'll catch a couple sharks, and we'll be done. Looks like everything's working how it should be. I don't think there are any other events that we need to block while we're fishing. As long as we got the use tool, we can't use the weapons. It's up to you if you want to be able to pull your inventory and stuff up, I guess. I think the targeting actually would still work, which may be a problem. Oh, it's not turning the players, so that's a good thing. Might want to disable targeting while fishing as well. Can't switch spells. So it seems to all be working good. I can still switch my arrows, but that's probably not going to cause issues either. And once we're done, we can use our weapons and stuff again. And also, if you pull out the weapon and try to use a fishing spot, we'll notice our sword is in our hand. It's a good thing I remembered that, because we actually do want to fix that as well. So we see we got all our fishies there. And we can use them all. So now let's quickly fix that issue with having our sword out. If we open up our BP fishing spot, grab this first comment section here and the interact key, drag it to the left. We're going to bring our gate over. And we're going to want to get our player, the player reference variable. And from this, get is in combat from the equipment component. Oops. If the player is in combat, well, first of all, if they're not in combat, we're going to take the false directly to this set fishing type. And if they are in combat, from the equipment component, we're going to toggle combat. And that will quickly take them out of combat before they start fishing. And you won't be able to go back into combat since it blocks our input buffer. So let's try it out. Pull our weapon out. We'll fish for some sharkies. And there we go. It just puts our weapon away before we fish. There we go. We've got a shark. So that's all we got to do. It's merged in, and it seems to all be working just fine. If anyone follows it and finds any issues with it, go ahead and shoot me a message. Just comment on the YouTube video or message me on Discord, and I'll make sure that I fix anything that we find that's not working right. But I think we've covered just about everything, so we should be good. Goodbye.